Good morning, everyone. So, one day I was walking through town when a nice man in a neat suit offered me a book he called The Greatest Story Ever Told. I thought, sweet, free book. Turns out it's a holy book for some religion, but I'm really just here for the plot. So, today we'll be going through the first couple chapters of what's probably actually the wackiest story ever told. God makes the heavens and the earth, and it's dark and empty, just water. So God says, God damn, it's dark in here. Let's turn on some lights. That's better. Then he said that the dark was, in fact, not the light. So he calls the light day and the dark night. This part I don't get. God separates the water from the water by making the sky, which implies that there's just some kind of free-floating water in space above the sky. So God says, yep, that's good enough for today. Let's call it quits while we're ahead. God says that there should be some not water stuff on Earth, so he makes dry land. Aw, heck yeah. Things are really coming together. Now, let's make some plants and shit to spice things up. That's better. God thinks to himself, those light things sure are cool. We should have different ones for day and nighttime. So God makes the sun, then the moon and stars, and then he just kind of sits back and is proud of what he's done. God felt pretty lonely, so he made some birds, then some sea critters. God thought they were really cool, so he wanted to make more of them, but at this point he was really tired, so he just told them to make more of themselves. God gets pretty excited about his new idea for animals that live on the weird, dry land parts with all the plants, so then he makes all of those. Then God says, you know what would be awesome? If we made one of those animals that looks like us, implying that there are some other gods that never get mentioned again. He says, and these little dudes are gonna run everything on the planet. So then he tells his new little human pals, hey, all this other stuff? I made it just for you, because I love you. Then he gives the man a cute little boop on the nose. God was pretty tired after a long week of making, everything, so he decides to unwind by playing some video games and taking a nap. Okay, now that we have all the basics out of the way, this story probably takes place on day 2, before the plants, but after heaven and earth. God gets really bored and makes a dust sculpture of himself and then breathes into its nose, turning the dust into a real boy. He put the real boy in his little garden, which he called Eden, where he was beta testing some plants and trees, including a big tree that had all of the knowledge, like all of it. So God tells his new little buddy, listen, bucko, feel free to eat from any tree except for the big tree of knowledge, because it will literally kill you. Then God started to feel bad that his little buddy was all alone, so God gives him all of the animals that he's been beta testing and says, go hog wild, name any of them whatever you want. So obviously the first one he named after that was the hog.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
God notices that none of the animals seem to be very good companions for his boy Adam, so he makes Adam very, very sleepy by using a cool hypnosis trick he found on the internet. Then, while Adam is sleeping, he performs advanced surgery and removes a rib, which he then turns into a woman. It's also explicit here that they're both naked and proud of it, so any other version of this story that censors them is factually wrong. So Snake slithers up to Eve, the woman, and says, did God really tell you not to eat from the knowledge tree? Yeah, he was pretty explicit that we would die if we did that. Which, plot hole, God never told Eve that. He told Adam that before she even existed. Nah bro, you'll just know the difference between good and evil. So Eve goes ahead and eats the fruit, which is never actually specified to be an apple, so let's just have fun with it and make it something cool like a durian. So Eve eats the stinky durian and shares it with Adam. Then they suddenly realize that being naked is actually a bad thing, so they cover themselves up with some leaves. They hear God coming through the garden, so they hide, and God asks where they went. And Adam says, well, I heard you coming, and I didn't want you to see me because I'm naked. And God says, who told you you were naked? Did you eat from the knowledge tree like I specifically told you not to do? Adam panics and says, she made me do it. So Eve goes, the snake made me do it. So God curses the snake to no longer have legs. Yeah, so the snake apparently had legs before this point. Is there a visual we have of this? That's better, thanks. To punish the new humans, God decides that women will have terribly painful childbirths and have to always be subservient to their husbands. And for men, they get the terrible punishment of having to eat food that comes from the ground. So God banishes them, saying that he doesn't want them taking from the tree of life. Then Adam and Eve turn to one another like, what? There was a tree of life this whole time? How come nobody ever told us about this? So Adam and Eve end up giving birth to 2 kids, Cain and Abel. Cain likes to farm and work the soil, while Abel keeps a flock of animals. Cain would offer up some of his crops to God, and Abel would offer up some of his livestock. God was going through a bit of a keto phase at the time, so he just took Abel's offering and kind of shunned Cain. Cain gets pissed because of this, and God intervenes like, why you so mad, bro? Then Cain brings Abel out into the field and murders him in cold blood. God comes back and is like, hey, where's Abel? And Cain goes, I don't know. Like one of those little kids who's very obviously guilty but doesn't want to admit it. God, being God, figures out what happened and says, screw you, Cain, you can't farm anymore. You just have to walk around the earth forever, I guess. Cain says, you can't do that. Anyone who sees me will kill me. And instead of saying, you get what you deserve, jackass, God says, no, I'll put a mark on you, and anyone who kills you will suffer 7 times worse. And Cain says, lol, what's 7 times worse than death? And God just kind of stares at him for a while before muttering out, septuple death. So then Cain has a kid, who 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 has 4 kids. There's Jabal, who's the father of people who live in tents and farmers, Jubal, father of people who play the strings and woodwinds, and Tubal-Cain, father of iron and bronze workers. Then there's Naamah, who's a woman, so she doesn't really have much significance. You know, biblical times. Then Adam, somehow still alive at 130, has another kid named Seth. Adam apparently lives another 800 years before dying at the ripe old age of 930. Then there's another pointless sequence of going from one important person to the next important person, this time from Seth to Noah. You don't really need to know anything about any of them, except for the fact that they all lived for way too long, like 500 years each minimum. There's also a dude named Enoch in the middle, not that Enoch, who doesn't die, but gets taken away by God, whatever that means. Now Noah lives to be 500 before having 3 kids, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Eventually, God is like, we gotta stop letting people live for so long. 120 is the max now. That will be broken later. Also, everyone sucks. This whole life thing was a big mistake. I'll just get rid of them all. Except Noah. I like Noah. But why did God like Noah? Noah wasn't violent is really the only reason given. I guess that was a huge deal back then. So God says, hey Noah, my guy, make yourself a real big boat, out of cypress wood specifically. Then God goes on to give Noah the whole IKEA instruction manual on how to build the thing. Then God explains his plan. I'm gonna make a big flood that will kill everything. I guess he forgot about fish. You know the next part. God tells Noah to round up 2 of all the animals and all the food he can get his hands on. Now this next part you might not know. God says, okay, good. Those first 2 of every animal was just a test run. Now get 7 more pairs of every bird and clean animal. So Noah does and somehow hasn't made the ark overflow. God says, alright, in a week the flood will start for 40 days and 40 nights. Noah, his wife, their kids, and their wives all herd the animals onto the ark, and the flood starts. And it flooded, and everything died. So God forgets about the whole flood thing until 150 days later, when he finally remembers and stops the rainfall, eventually getting to the point where Noah and pals could see the mountaintops again. So Noah starts throwing birds out of the ark to see if they could prove that dry land was back. A couple of months later, he sends out a dove who comes back with an olive branch, proving that trees are now visible. A week after that, the same dove doesn't return, and Noah assumes that it's safe to leave the ark after a year of waiting. God, who apparently forgot about the whole being done with life and humanity thing, tells Noah and the animals to leave the ark and repopulate. To show his appreciation, Noah builds an altar to God and sacrificially burns several now highly endangered species. Then God comes back and says, "I will never hurt another living being so long as I live," which is very wrong. God tells Noah that he's blessed and everything on earth is for him, except for the blood of animals. You can't have that. God also tells him that humans have free reign to murder animals that threaten or hurt them. God then establishes a covenant with Noah, his family, and all the animals on the ark, saying that the rainbow will forever symbolize his love for them and their descendants. After the whole flood thing, Noah retires to a humble life of owning a vineyard. One day, he gets super wasted and passes out nude in his tent, where Ham finds him and sees him naked. Ham tells his brothers, and they walk in backwards with a cloth to cover their dad's nudity without seeing his dingle. When Noah wakes up and hears what happens, he gets super pissed at Ham and curses his son Canaan to be the lowest of slaves to Shem and Japheth. Then Noah dies at age 950. That's really all I've got for now, so come back next time for when God cuts everyone's penis off and turns a woman into a pillar of salt. Good night.